as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day.
Became a nightmare. I'm gonna do a walkthrough.
Over 1,300 pieces of evidence were collected from the crime scene.
Scratch marks along the wall.
There was no doubt something paranormal was going on.
And for that exact reason, I'll continue my research to drive away the darkness.
Good evening and welcome to ASAP Radio. My name's Nicole Katsanis.
And I'm Ben Robison.
So, it has been a little while.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a bummer, but, you know, like always, life happens. And it's not like we've just been sitting here doing nothing, right?
Yeah, we've been pretty busy with other things going on.
Yeah, and so let's kind of recap on some of those things. I guess the biggest one would be the OGC.
Yeah, Oregon Ghost Conference was at the very beginning of April. Now, to even back up probably a little bit more, we didn't have a podcast in March.
No.
And that, you know, that was partly due to the fact of conflicting schedules and just other, you know, competing just things going on in our lives. And so fast forward to April, we have the Oregon Ghost Conference, and that was a ton of fun.
It was really exciting for me because it was my first one.
Yeah.
I hadn't gone before when it was in Oregon City, and for it to be out in Seaside this year, I thought it was an amazing turnout.
It was.
I think everybody who was there, who participated, who organized it, I think it was just extremely well done. Great turnout, tons of people, some great classes, some cool experiments. I thought it was cool.
It was. And here's the other thing is that, you know, because of that new location, nobody had any idea what to expect. We knew that it was a real conference center. So it was kind of like the OGC finally grew up and got to be in a real conference center environment.
Yeah.
And that was exciting all in its own. But I think with the way that it was organized this go round and all of the efforts from people like Kristen Gray and Aaron Collins and Rocky Smith and many others that I'm forgetting the name at the moment, they really made this event outstanding. And we had just a ton of fun doing it. I got to even speak, which probably won't go too far into because that was a really nerve-wracking ordeal for me. But
you did good.
Yeah, it was, you know, it was what it was. And I'm glad that I had that opportunity to be able to speak about my CERM hypothesis.
I have a little bit of it on tape, too.
Oh, good. Yeah, we can burn that.
No. It's what I listen to if I can't sleep. Just kidding.
That one hurt.
I'm just kidding.
That one really hurt. That hurts so bad. Do you feel bad yet?
No, not really.
Oh.
Anyway, I thought it was cool being there, seeing everybody, meeting new people.
Yes.
Meeting some people I'd only seen or talked with on Facebook. Meeting just some more people and networking. We had people coming out for it from all over. There were people from Utah. There were people from Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, it had a pretty good draw. And even listening to the people, some of the people who came in, like some said, yeah, I came out specifically for the Ghost Conference. But then we also had people saying, I didn't even know this was going. We were just happened to be in Seaside, saw signs for the Ghost Conference, and we're like, yeah, we want to go.
Heck yeah. That's what I thought was pretty cool, too, is the diverse collection of people that came into it. Not only were they diverse in their own way, but they were just for different reasons why they were there, you know. And some people wanted to see, and speak with the folks that had psychic abilities. And some folks wanted to have their tarot cards read. And some folks just wanted to schmooze, It was pretty cool.
Yeah, there's stuff there for everybody.
Yep.
It was nice.
What else did we do recently?
Well, you have an investigation coming up, my friend.
In June.
Mm-hmm, the end of June.
Yep, it's my quote-unquote bachelor party. Casey Goodwin of Oregon Paranormal, he's my best man, and he's throwing a bachelor party for me where we're going to be investigating a haunted B&B as well as a haunted winery. So I'm pretty excited about that. And I get to do that with several great friends, colleagues like Michael White, Neil McNeil, Jay Verberg. So it's going to be a ton of fun.
Yeah. I'm not too worried about any strippers on this one, so that's
No.
good. Thanks, Casey.
I told him I didn't want any of that this go round. I wasn't really interested
it's
in
cool.
that. I've done that before.
Maybe
and,
you'll have like the ghost of, stripper.
Right.
That'll be awesome. You can get a paranormal lap dance.
A supernatural sexation.
Yeah. A sexation.
Sexation.
Wow.
I don't know what that is. I just made that up, but whatever.
You should put a trademark on that one.
Yeah, sexation. I'm just going to keep saying that word. Anyway, so what else have we been up to?
We've been talking with some past clients, and they want us to come back out again.
Yeah, and that's one thing. Let's touch on that for a little minute. Touch. With this field of research, it's not a hit it and quit it kind of thing where you just do an investigation and move
one and
on
done.
and never, one and done. You don't just do that with clients, especially since they can continually have ongoing strife as a result of what's taking place in their home. So our job is to come out, and it can be out several, times. I've heard of groups going out dozens of times to investigate the same location. This particular client we've been working with for several years, and matter of fact, it started with my old nonprofit and moved into when I started ASEP. They continually have activity that happens pretty much throughout the year, but it seems to heighten every June-ish.
July.
June, July. And that was when they first moved into the home and started doing things like renovating the place and doing a little bit of remodeling. So we're hoping to, capitalize on that particular timing and the flow of what's taking place.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to get back to them and set up something so that way we can go ahead and try to see what we can capture this go round. It's can be a little bit frustrating because we go out there, we do a lot of work to try to set up equipment, be ready. The research into this is kind of long gone because once we first originally took on the case, we did all that originally during the initial preliminary stages.
Yeah, that's what's kind of nice about this case. I mean, the background has been,
Right.
dealt with. The history has been done. We've already gone out and talked with the clients and done our, interviews with them. We know them. So it's not like we're having to spend all this time trying to figure all that out. We know the layout of the home.
Mm-hmm.
So we can just basically go in. We know how to set it up. Boom, do it, and done. So that makes it pretty nice.
The challenge is just, are we going to get anything?
Right. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that hours of watching footage and
Right.
listening to stuff isn't going to lessen. But, I mean, the pre-work is all done.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's see. I think other than just general life stuff,
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot else that's been going on. I think we've kind of covered it. So why don't we bring Miss Michelle Belanger on? She's our guest tonight.
Yes.
She is an author, psychic, vampire.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on that.
Yeah.
Psychic vampire.
Yeah.
That's a new term for me. I think it's kind of cool.
It is cool. It is. I mean, it's like with anything. If you have that ability, there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes along with it.
Right.
And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk with Michelle about that.
Oh, definitely. I'm bringing it up.
Yeah. And, I'm sure she's going to be able to enlighten us to quite a bit of it as well.
Oh, definitely.
I don't have the strongest background and understanding of it, but I do know a fair amount of it, about it. And it's really due to her, as a matter of fact. So
Nice.
that I've learned about it, watching her on other shows and specials that talked and dealt with that particular topic. So.
I just love the term personally, being fascinated with, that kind of stuff. I love vampires and vampirism and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's cool.
Yeah.
But it'll be really interesting to hear from her more about it and maybe, get some insights on what it is and how to properly use it, I guess, and protect from it. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll have to see.
For sure.
But
All
anyway, with that, we will give you a little bit of background. Our guest tonight is Michelle Belanger. She is, as Ben said, psychic vampire. She has been on a couple of different shows, correct?
She's been on, a couple different shows, but she's also been featured in other specials, is probably the best way to put it, that had covered a range of topics, and one of them being psychics and psychic vampires and things like that. So
she also teaches classes, give lectures. She's an author. She has a lot of fiction and nonfiction books.
Yep.
She's also created her own tarot deck, which I think is kind of pretty spiffy.
It's pretty rad, actually.
Yeah. So I mean, she's a singer in a band. She does art. She is just
she's all
amazing.
Over the place.
She is amazing.
Yeah, very busy woman, if you
She
can only
is.
imagine.
Yeah. But she's taken some time out of her night for us. So that's amazing. So thank you, Michelle. And with that, I guess you want to get her on the phone?
Yep, we'll bring her on. So
right.
Stand by real quick. All right, welcome back to ASAP Radio. My name is Ben Robison.
And I'm Nicole Katsanis.
Tonight's guest is Michelle Belanger, and she joins us from, you're out of Cleveland, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So we wanted to welcome you to the show, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down and chat with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
You bet. So we kind of start off by just getting a little bit of idea for our listeners' sake. A little bit of background on yourself, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, most people probably recognize me from my appearances on Paranormal State. Before that, and continuing through that, I'm a writer of both fiction and nonfiction. I think at this point, probably my most widely selling book is The Dictionary of Demons. And I've got a degree in comparative religious studies and 19th century British literature, where you can't spit in British literature at the time without hitting paranormal and supernatural topics.
Right.
Vampire, pretty much everything that goes bump in the night. And anything that goes bump in the night, I've probably written a book about it. Lately, I have been turning my creative juices more toward fiction, kind of as just a way to stretch my wings and to just get away from having to write. You can only teach people how to do psychic development and make energy balls so many ways, so many times for so many books.
Sure.
And I've been doing that for about 20 years. So
Yeah. I can imagine that can be a little bit of a challenge after a while.
Yeah, and I had started off actually as a fiction writer quite some time ago, like back. My first publications were in the late '80s, to give you some idea,
Oh, wow.
and yeah, and I'd gotten away from that and found the nonfiction niche, and I still obviously am a researcher and a cultist. I still do ghost hunting. I work with Resident Undead and a couple of other people, both locally and internationally.
Okay.
But the storytelling is a really good break too.
Yeah. And with the fiction, are you focusing on paranormal topics, or are you just actually kind of going wherever you feel like your creative muse allows you to go?
It's absolutely paranormal inspired, and in some ways it explores ideas and theories that I can't that come up in the nonfiction but are too tenuous to really write a book about solidly. So it's in the book series, the main character has psychic experiences, and some of the ways in which I experience that stuff, that you can't really see how it works in my head. It sounds it sounds better to frame it in fiction, in a story, to like show you organically through another person's eyes how it feels to have that experience.
Sure.
And that is also one of the aspects of writing the series that I'm writing, the Shadowside series with Conspiracy of Angels, Harsh Gods, and the third book, the Resurrection Game, is out like next year. Harsh Gods is the one that's coming out this year.
And you've been in the middle of editing that one as well?
Yep. Yeah, it's a long, complicated process because you as the writer write your first edition, you send it off to an editor, they go over it, they send it back, it goes through copy editors. There's a lot of back and forth, and there's just a year or more. Like the first version of this was turned in on my end in December of, I think, 2014.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
So
quite the process.
yeah, it's a long process.
Yeah, Nicole's got a little bit of background. She's done a little bit of editing for a colleague of ours that has wrote a book. Has wrote a recent book, and so she got to be a part of that and helped with the editing of it. And I was amazed just at the back and forth that they had to do to communicate and make sure things are interpreted correctly, or just that they're on the same page as far as where things were going with the story and whatnot.
Yeah, my biggest challenge with the Shadowside series has been, since I've been writing stuff on nonfiction on paranormal and supernatural topics for so long, and have an established audience with that, I'm a little spoiled by not having to explain certain concepts. But with the fiction, it's urban fantasy, so there's no guarantee that the people reading it have the same background.
Right.
That the folks who are really, really into this stuff seriously are going to. So I'm constantly being reminded that I need to explain a little bit more clearly in a few places, and catch everybody else up to speed on some terminology,
Right.
and make it clearer, make it more immediate, more present for someone who may have never had those experiences before.
Sure.
But that's a great thing because, I mean, it's a fiction book, so you might get a different fan base than you would from your nonfiction, but they're still learning some really pertinent things.
That part of the inspiration and people that I was looking up to, who really have been supportive with it, Laurel K. Hamilton, Jim Butcher, they are well-established fiction writers, but they also they've gone the extra mile when writing about paranormal and psychic experiences in their books, energy work, to actually learn how the stuff works, to integrate a lot of verisimilitude. And the genre I'm writing in, urban fantasy, like that verisimilitude is really important. Like if you have a character using a gun, you really need to go out and like learn how a gun works and explain it in a gritty way, because there's fantastic elements in this fiction, but it's set here and now in the world we live in.
Right.
And so you can't just like talk out of your posterior, because somebody actually knows how a gun works.
Right.
Sure.
Because you'll have the people who will call you on it.
Yeah, but I've also, especially for energy work and paranormal experiences, it presents this great opportunity to show it organically, to go, and make it exciting, and make a nod to the parts that are definitely fantasy, but also have the nuts and bolts of the mechanics of the experience referenced. So if somebody's inspired by that story and inspired by the characters, can then go and learn more about what it really is like.
That's awesome. I think a lot of people, watch reality shows or read some stories and they're like, I want to do that. And they think, this fiction is 100% accurate and they can go and do it just like in the movies or just like the book. And if you're writing a fiction book that has nonfiction elements, if they do try and go and recreate, they actually can, and they're not hurting themselves, not hurting other people, or doing anyone a disservice. So I think that's great.
Yeah, well, and I mean, reality TV, there's a certain amount of storytelling that goes into that. Not to say that what's going on is fake, but to make it palatable to an audience, the producers and the directors create a storyline of the events. There's a narrative that happens. People become characters based on, who they are and what they're inhabiting in that. And so it's this weird space of we're living those stories in the reality TV stuff.
Right.
If you got to see like the 3 days worth of filming that we did on Paranormal State that didn't make it to 22 minutes of television, you may not see the story there. You may not see the same narrative that the directors had to kind of like take the high points, because when we were living it, we were just I can't count the number of hours I spent in darkened attics and basements going, is there anybody here? You want to knock?
Right.
And everybody watching then gets to see the immediate cut to when you actually get the response. But anybody who's ever gone ghost hunting for real knows there's probably 5 hours in between that first question and any response whatsoever.
If you're lucky enough to even get a response.
Yeah. And then, the next 3 hours you spend trying to figure out if you can recreate that response and make sure that it wasn't the wind or, the cameraman having a gas because everybody had tacos.
Exactly. Yep. And I'm glad that you point that out, because that is a reality that we face, doing paranormal research. But at the same time, everybody's got their group of friends or, people who reach out to you and you end up, talking to you about this, that have this almost, fantasy idea of what we do, in that every question has an answer that, has been given to us, when in fact, it's like you said, there's many hours of stuff of, just asking questions, and it's a one-sided conversation and you never get anything.
Yeah, I mean, not every time you turn on your recorder do you get an EVP, but the way things have to be presented in TV to boil it down into those 22 minutes or however long an episode is going to be, what you see is somebody pulling out their recorder, asking a question, and voila, you have this awesome response. And I think it makes people who are getting into ghost hunting have really unfairly high expectations of what their results will be, and they're afraid that maybe they're doing it wrong, or it just. I think it's important to understand that no matter how honest the crew on a TV show may be, what is going to be presented, because it is TV, because of the format, will always be somewhat misleading from how the experience is in reality.
Yes. That makes absolute sense. And, back to what you're talking about, the viewers getting this, almost unrealistic expectation of what they're going to receive for responses or just their interaction in general. I had a member of my nonprofit many years ago who was an avid, show watcher, and we were upstairs in at an investigation, and he swore that he expected something to be behind a curtain in the bathroom, and so when he whipped it open, he was so defeated. He expected something to be there because he had thought he had heard a noise, thought he had some kind of interaction going on, and pretty much was just, kind of done with the investigation at that point. His morale went downhill from that, point. So it's important that people realize that, TV has doing their best to give you everything in one shot in that time period that they're allotted, and not the really drawn out long periods of waiting and no answers that are the other reality to it.
Yeah, nobody wants to see me and Elfie Music freezing our noses off in a barn in Gettysburg for,
Right.
the better part of a night and get nothing at all.
Exactly.
That would be an amazing show. Just 30 minutes of silence, blackness. Just,
Yeah, there'd be a lot of sleeping going on.
This is what
during
it's
the
really
show.
like to be a paranormal investigator. Black.
Yep.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about your psychic work. Like how old were you when you realized you had some psychic abilities and kind of worked on them?
I was fortunate in that I was raised in a family where that was a fairly normal thing. Like it ran in both my grandmother's line and my grandfather's line
nice.
on my mother's side. And so the real awareness was coming to realize that that wasn't a normal experience for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Going to school and finding that not everybody else was aware like that, and that some people even were weirded out by conversations like that. I was additionally lucky in the fact that the small town I lived in, we had a haunted. The town library was haunted, and pretty much everybody had some experience with the ghost who was there. It had made the papers several times, and so weird and extraordinary stuff wasn't so far beyond the pale that you were completely ostracized if you had those experiences. Now I'm a reader. Like if I'm having an experience, I need to know not just like how it works, but why it works, who was having that experience, 10 years ago, 100 years ago. And so pretty much as soon as I could get my paws on books on parapsychology, like the stuff that the Rhine Institute was doing at Duke University, and, ESP, because they called it ESP back then. That's
Right.
how old I am, I guess.
Yeah.
Zener cards, as soon as I could start digging through that. And I remember like really sinking my teeth into stuff like that as early as like fourth grade.
Wow.
And probably before. I also had what I now know is like a completely amazingly unique experience. I went to a public school in Northeast Ohio, and in fourth and fifth grade, as like an extracurricular thing on Saturdays, they offered a program called the Saturday Enrichment Program. There were multiple classes that were offered from like computer programming, VIC-20s, by the way, which we saved our work on little cassette tapes, wargaming with miniatures, and one of the teachers in the school system had a father-in-law who was part of the Society for Psychical Research.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
And he taught parapsychology.
Wow.
And was allowed to offer it. And I took that in fourth and in fifth grade.
Wow.
And we got to play with dowsing rods, with Zener cards. One of like the little last part of the class was he had us trying to predict whether or not Reagan would win the election.
Huh.
That's funny.
So you really got a kind of a kickstart right into this whole paranormal field.
Yeah, and I had no idea what type of a charmed life it was.
Yeah. Yeah, no joke. So from that point, did you just find yourself, your interest was piqued and you just kept going with it? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there was no point at which it was not a part of my life.
Right.
And from that point, what I did find was some folks who have psychic experiences, and I don't. This might sound judgy, and I don't mean it to. I'd run into a number of people who are psychic who just allowed experiences to happen to them passively. Like they didn't want to understand it. They were a little afraid to understand it.
Right.
And they really didn't get any control over it as a result. So like they'd go to a place, they'd be overwhelmed. It was a source of more fear and uncomfortability on their part
Right.
than it was like a passionate need to understand it. And I had no compunction reading anything that might teach me something about it. So this was one of the ways that I started to research magic and the occult. And there was, especially at that time, this huge division of like psychic stuff was kind of one thing. Talking about ESP was one thing, but if you talk about like magic, occult phenomenon, summoning, raising anything, that's occult. That's bad.
Right.
But there's a lot of very valuable ideas on how to shield, how to control your abilities, how to ward spaces. In all of that, and I read voraciously through all of it, and took what was useful.
Good. I think that's very responsible on your part. Because I know I've talked to a few different psychics, and they kind of are how you were saying. Like they say, "Oh, I can't be in large spaces; it's just too overwhelming." And I don't have that kind of ability where I get that overwhelming feeling. And for me, if I felt like that, I would want to know, well, how do I make it not happen? Or how do I work on it to make it work for me?
Yeah.
Rather than just saying, this is how it is, end all be all. So I think that's great. I think it's great for people to know that if you have abilities, there are ways to work on them and not make it so scary or a plague. There's things you can do.
Now, do you ever find that when working with people to try to help them, with their abilities, that some people just can't move forward with it at all?
There are a lot of factors that impact how someone can make peace with or integrate their abilities. Psychic stuff happens and it's all in your head, in that sense of just because it's all in your head doesn't mean that it's imaginary. But it's happening in not just your psychic space, but it's your psychological space. So your emotions, how you feel, what your background is, your belief system, all of these things tie into how you respond to those experiences, how you interpret them, and whether or not you see them as normal, something to be feared, something to try to push away. So the people I have found who have the greatest challenges are people who come from some kind of very fanatical, closed-minded background, be it like, say that they were raised with, among atheists who just did not believe in anything and this was bad. And clearly if you were having any kind of experience, you were mentally ill.
Right.
Or a similar level of fanaticism among a very conservative religious worldview, where it can only be a sign of evil or a sign of possession if you're having these experiences. And that biases the person to see any experience, whether it's actually good or bad, as something to try to repress, something to run away from, something that's negative. And that gets them all twisted up inside, and will really retard their ability to come to understand with it, come to terms with it, and learn how it works for them, and basically make peace with their own head. The worst thing somebody who has abilities can do is repress them, try to shut them away in a box.
Right.
Those are the ones that have the hardest time then dealing with it later in life, because some of the sensitivity never goes away. It's just they've pushed it so far back into their head that it's in a place where they don't have really good control over it at all. And so more than being able to use it as a gift, it's something that they feel victimized by. They're the ones that, they walk into a place and it's just overwhelming and they don't know how to shut it down, and they almost can't find the switch in their own head to make it calm down.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of what I figured, because I've ran into people, as most of us have, that have had some kind of almost sheltered, very, as you were putting it, just, I'm totally drawing a blank on the word you used, but, they just had some kind of fanatical, that's it, background. And at any rate, I even had a case one time where I dealt with a lady who had a very sheltered, fanatical Christian background, and trying to work with her was very difficult. And so luckily at that time I had a member of my team who is, a church-going Christian, and he went in there and he sat down with her and tried to explain things from another perspective, just to kind of help the paradigm shift almost take place. And that was it was a challenge. It was a big challenge. We weren't trying to make her think differently. We were just trying to help her open up her mind a bit to understand, look at all the facets that we're trying to consider.
Yeah.
So you got into this, obviously you hit the ground running. Did you take on cases as a kid? I mean, were you doing those kind of investigations?
I'm trying to think of the first time I formally investigated anything. I definitely had a reputation in high school as the person to go to. It's it turned into I was a freaking party game is really what I was.
Right.
Starting off the day before first period, they were going down the lockers. There were 3 or 4 people what color is my aura? I mean, that was to the point where I'm black, leave me alone.
Right.
About halfway through high school. College, enough people knew I was sensitive that there were several instances of, hey, I think there's something in, this dorm or in this, could you, over in this apartment I'm at, could you come and give me some idea of what's going on? And that was where I started to get a good handle on not just how to sense it, but also how to clear it out. Mm-hmm. And how that a lot of things that people were mistaking for intelligent hauntings were really just like a thumbprint pressed into the plaster, emotion left behind.
Right.
I called them memory ghosts before I found that other people had words for these things too. Just that echo of emotion that had built up. One of the apartments that, and it was nothing so formal as an investigation. I mean, I didn't go in taking notes or recording anything. I just, went in, picked up what I could pick up, and then tried to fix it.
Right.
And this was someplace where the people who moved in had been perfectly okay with one another until they moved into this place, and then they found themselves fighting, and they started to connect it to if they came home and once they were in the apartment, it was this malaise, this the aura of the place just got to them. And talking with neighbors, we learned that seemed to just be a thing. Nobody ended up staying there for very long, and it just seemed to have a history of fights and violence, and it needed a good psychic house cleaning. Literally just needed a whole bunch of emotional ick scrubbed off the walls.
Right.
Well, it's funny you brought up your high school and how you felt like a science project kind of thing, or a carnival game. Because I was talking to some other people just about psychic etiquette, the do's and don'ts when you're dealing with a psychic that's a friend or whatever. Do you have specific pet peeves and things that you are please don't do this to your psychic friends?
I've got pet peeves on both sides. For somebody to ask a psychic friend every 5 minutes, what's my energy like? What's my aura like? That's like asking your hairdresser friend, could you do my hair? How about now? How about now?
Right.
And we don't think about it. You don't ask your friend who's a lawyer to constantly do free stuff for you legally. You might be hey, I know that this is a thing that you do. Could I have advice if it's important? But don't do it frivolously.
Okay.
On the other side, for folks who are psychic, there's definite etiquette that I would wish people would hold up to. Just randomly walking up to somebody because you think that you can see their dead relatives, or you think that you can see a past life in them, and just sort of blurting that out. There's no guarantee that person, first of all, has even context, framework for your worldview, how you interpret that stuff. And it might be, what you might end up doing is taking someone who at some point in their life could be open to those ideas and just making them angry, feel feel affronted by it.
Or you could scare them off.
Yes, and so unsolicited psychic readings, they're a huge pet peeve of mine. And actually, a bigger pet peeve is when some psychic comes up to me and like tries to psychically read me, and I'm like, "Oh, honey, please."
I'm sure that happens a fair amount too.
It happened more when I was younger, but yeah, every once in a while. And I get I want to share this thing, and I know you're into this thing because since my face is on TV, I'm a safer quantity to talk to about such things.
Sure.
But just sort of like the opening sally of a conversation shouldn't be, I see all this stuff about you, and aren't I really cool because of it? I'd rather just get to know the person as a person first.
Right. Well, I would think that would be kind of a little invasive too. Like, if I want you to see, well, I mean, I'm sure you can see it, but don't tell me about it unless I'm like open to it. That's basically saying like, I can see what color underwear you're wearing right now. Like, those look great. That's a little invasive right now. Like, let's buy me some coffee first.
Yeah. At least what's your name again?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, let's start with an introduction first. A handshake, maybe. Yeah. Well, this is actually probably a perfect spot for us to take a halfway break and then reconvene here after a short pause. So if you need to, step away for a bit, and we will go ahead and take a break real quick, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to ASAP Radio. I'm Ben Robison.
And I'm Nicole Ketsanis.
We're going to go ahead and resume our conversation with Miss Michelle Belanger and kind of pick up where we left off. Nicole, I think you had something you wanted to kind of roll into.
We were touching on, Michelle the psychic, but you aren't just your average everyday Joe psychic. Aren't you?
Nope.
No. You found I was watching a video of yours on YouTube, and you were talking about what you call psychic vampirism and how you came to realize that at a pretty young age, right?
Yeah, and it was one of the reasons why I was reading everything I could get my hands on to see if there was anybody else that had experiences like mine.
So can you kind of explain that for our listeners who might not know what that means, or it might scare them, like, oh, vampire.
Yeah. It rightfully so does it scare them, because almost all of the literature presents the idea of psychic vampires as they're all people who are out to get you. They're all predators. If they're aware of their ability at all, they're going to just do horrible things to you. And if they're not aware, then they are going to be that universal pain in the neck that's just sucking the life out of every office and home. So a psychic vampire is somebody who needs to regularly and actively take generally human vital energy in order to maintain their own health and well-being. They are, in addition to that, like incredibly tuned into that vital energy. And I am inclined to say that the taking is almost easily misinterpreted as something that must be predatory, and it is more a natural flux and flow. They're people who are very tied into that pull and push of energy, breathing it in and breathing it out with the world. There's folks who are empaths, and they sometimes will mistake themselves for taking that energy in, because when they go someplace, especially if there's emotional energy, they are tuned so finely that, like the strings of a violin, when another note is struck, they will vibrate in harmony with it.
Oh, wow.
That's actually really beautiful.
It's a little bit different for somebody who's a psychic vampire, because there is a process where you are taking some of that energy in, and you are often experiencing all the same stuff that an empath is going to. Like you can kind of taste and get the feel for it. without knowing, what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it, it's really easy to become an accidental predator, to become someone who finds, high energy situations, finds ways to get significant reactions out of people in order to take that and to feed yourself. And a lot of my research as a young person, teen, young adult, was trying to understand, first of all, what this capacity was. Could I control it? Was it necessarily a bad thing? And in the end, really just bringing it into consciousness, becoming aware of how, on some fundamental level, I am very tuned into the flux and flow of energy, the give and take. I mean, and everybody engages in a certain level of energy exchange. Every intimate conversation, every time that you engage passionately with someone, when you go to a show at a sports arena, a rock concert, any of that, like the crowd, everybody is engaging in some exchange to one extent or another. And the only thing that separates what I label a psychic vampire from your average person, your average energy worker, is, generally speaking, there is more energy taken than is given back out to the world. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. There are plenty of people who produce way more energy than they know what to do with. And what I have found is it just seems to be a natural balance, a yin and yang. Some people don't have quite enough, some people have too much, and they will easily balance one another out.
Nice. So it's nothing to be scared about.
It doesn't have to be.
Good.
It can be misused, but honestly, way more dangerous for both the psychic vampire and the people who could be potential victims than someone who's conscious of what they're doing is someone who just doesn't have a clue.
Right.
Who's never had an ability to understand it, never had an opportunity to figure out what's going on with them, and they just... They're miserable because, if they don't have like the right level of attention or, pay attention to me and oh, poor me are really good traps that they find themselves into. Their health definitely deteriorates and people really start to avoid them because they're not the kind of person you want to be around. But it's usually like, your old Aunt Edna who never leaves the house. But, when you come over, she's going to sit and talk to you about her bunions, corns, and hemorrhoids for like the next 4 hours.
Oh, yeah. We all have one of those.
Yeah. And it's it's draining. It is draining.
And it is. And Aunt Edna's getting something out of it. But if she understood it better, she'd be able to do it more functionally and not actually drive everybody away while she was doing it.
That's good. So do you teach people on both ends of it, like how to be aware if you are a psychic vampire and then how to, on the other end, shield yourself? Yeah.
Yes. I actually teach a lot of psychic self-defense, especially because, knowing how it works from the other end. I mean, I know somebody who has the capacity to be a psychic vampire, somebody who has it, and we believe it's inborn. And I'm not unique in it. Actually, there's an entire community. There are thousands of people in the vampire community around the world, which might be a little weird to hear, but it's a fairly extensive group of people who are vampiric and for one way or another. But knowing how it works makes me really good at teaching people how to recognize when they are being attacked, when someone's taking their energy, and then what you do to shut it down. I have been mentoring and teaching people who have the capacity, who are vampiric, what to do about it, how to control it, and how to be ethical about it. Actually, that's one of the main things, first big things that I was known for and wrote. It's called The Black Veil. The title was not my title, but it has become the most widely recognized set of ethical guidelines around the world for folks who identify as vampires. And it really just boils down to don't be a dick.
Exactly.
If only everybody could follow that. Just don't be a dick, people.
So now, when you first took on, say, formal cases and were working through those on a regular basis, or I'm assuming you did on a regular basis, was there a case that you came across, or maybe even to date, that you truly got scared because of something in general?
Oh, let's see. Now, I will preface it with I think most of my casework ends up being more with people than with locations. That's not to say that I haven't done a lot of work with locations, but most of my abilities and my know-how uh, helps me really assist the people who are overwhelmed by their perceptions.
Okay.
And probably the most significant things that I've investigated boil down to there's somebody in the residence who, whether they realize it or not, are a contributing factor to the phenomenon. You know, the
An
poltergeist
agent.
nexus. Yeah, your classic poltergeist nexus.
Yep.
And I have the personal knowledge to help them see it and then get it under control and not necessarily be afraid of it because it's often happening because they're afraid. Probably the weirdest and wildest was at a property that I will call Whitethorn Woods. I talk about it in Haunting Experiences. It's property owned by the college I went to, and it's why it's going by a pseudonym, so I don't get sued. And because it's a Jesuit Catholic college, and I don't think that they are very keen on acknowledging exactly how freakishly haunted this place is.
Do tell. Do tell.
I don't know what else to call what is there beyond dark fae. Like it's something in the land. A donor to the college left a property that has like 2 summer houses. It's along the canal system, so there's actually locks, like riverboat locks on the
Right.
property. I do not know how old the houses are. I do know that some of the bridge work around the houses dated to like 1929, 1930. There's a lot of woods. Most of it's wooded. A lot of whitethorn and blackthorn trees, and the things that happened both in the houses and in those woods. There were so many experiences. It was nearly impossible to catalog all of them. From people feeling overwhelmed by other personalities, foreign personalities that were making them say and do things, to one fellow who ended up walking out into the lake up to his chest and only woke up by the
wow.
time it was up to his shoulders.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, he was not somebody who sleepwalked either.
Wow.
Things that go bump in the night, lights in the woods. I mean, it was unhooked, and this was 2 years in a row. There were multiple experiences. The first time it was, wow, this place is pretty creepy. The second time I went out with the group of people with the great intention of like kind of poking it with a stick to see what really was going on. Now I was my last name is Belanger, and my grandfather's side of the family is French, Acadian French, but I was raised by my grandmother and her family, so Irish, Mahoney. And, the Irish have long-standing traditions of things that live in woodland areas and little people and things like that. And I have to say, as much as calling it fairies sounds ridiculous because it probably conjures images of Tinkerbell,
Right.
everything that I was raised on with like the hosting of the Shay, the Black Coach, the Wild Hunt, storied folklore of the Celtic Isles. That place really screamed of all that stuff. Like it was like a wild power. It was sentient. It seemed to be more than one thing, and it was really clear when it didn't want us there anymore. That coincided with real physical animals behaving in a way that I have never seen before and am happy to have never seen since. Blackbirds of multiple types. This was the part that was startling. It wasn't just like starlings or greckles. It was starlings, greckles, crows, just birds that were black.
Oh, wow.
Started coming out of the woods from a specific spot and landing first on the roof of the farmhouse as we're cleaning up to go back to the college. And they blanket the roof of the house. And once they land, they are silent and they're just staring at us.
That's a little ominous.
That's very creepy.
Oh no, it was so creepy, and at the time I was really like I was that bad ghost hunter, poke it with a stick and see if it pokes back.
Right.
That I say you really shouldn't do. And it was a large group of us. The guy who had keys to it was in his purple geo tracker, and he's like, I am out of here, and I will go to the front of the gate where everything was super crazy security systems where you had to have keypad codes and stuff. He's like, I will wait for 10 minutes. If you guys are not gone, I'm locking this and just getting the hell out of here.
Oh no.
Wow.
And I was the last out, and the two houses were separated by a little ravine and a little footbridge, and I lingered to the point where the birds had started to get across that bridge and almost come to our side, and I really wanted to see what would happen because there was this impending sense of something else in the woods, of like some great sentience that was just on the verge of appearing, and I really wanted to see what it was.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I kind of didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always have that two-sided thing where you're like, come on, bring it on. And then you're kind of like, I think I may not want to know what's going on.
There's always that
here,
be careful
so.
what you wish for kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there's, when you're sensitive or even when you're not, there's those moments in ghost hunting where you feel something, but it's very subjective. None of the cameras are picking it up, and you can't necessarily like put it in a petri dish and study it. But when physical animals behave in a way that makes no damn sense whatsoever,
Right.
That's beyond the pale. Like that's a level. And I, for years, was like, did that really happen? And even the life that I live, and I know there have got to be people listening, and I know it's probably been the same for you guys. Like when you have one of those like peak paranormal experiences, no matter how much you believe, there's still a little voice in your head that's like, nah, really?
Right.
Yeah.
Did that really happen? Mm-hmm. And when I reconnected with one of the folks that I had been at this location with, and we had started separately talking about the experience at a party as kind of like a retrospective of our crazy stuff that we got into in college, we both had to stop and go, oh, wait, the bird thing, like you remember that too. That was okay.
It wasn't just me. Yeah.
That really did happen.
I was really hoping I just made that up.
Thought that was a lucid dream.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now I own two of your books. I own the Dictionary of Demons and the Ghost Hunter's Survival Guide. I absolutely love, and I still to this day, and just rave about the Ghost Hunter's Survival Guide. It's literally one of my all-time favorite books on this subject, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to get you on the show. Was it taught me a lot about grounding, centering, and energy clearing, and techniques that you use throughout that whole book on that case.
Thank you so much.
You bet. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that.
Okay, yes.
I don't know if that was your most meaningful case or if it was just one that was such a good case in point to be able to use. But what made you choose that? Because you've obviously got a long history of research and investigation under your belt. What made that case the one that you said, that's what I'm going to use for this book?
Mainly because so many points that are necessary points to understand came together in that particular one. And I will say, I was required to change a couple of details so that it wouldn't be recognizable for who it was. And I will say that the significant difference is it was not a farmhouse, it was a trailer.
Oh, okay.
That was the one thing that the publisher was like, you have to change this because people will could potentially recognize who this is. And it's one of the things that really frustrated me with the nonfiction was there were so many rights and permission issues that it became almost impossible sometimes to talk genuinely about experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Everything else happened exactly as it is described, but the backdrop, rather than a farmhouse, it is a trailer. There were so many things, and I think the thing that stood out to me on two fronts. Was, I had a student along with me, and I got to kind of watch the case and the experiences unfold through that student's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And when you've done something for long enough, it can be difficult to hit that place where you step back and are able to see the small steps,
Right.
able to see the pieces that are actually extraordinary. And through the student, I was able to get a better handle on exactly like what the high points were, like where we absolutely had to handle this, where the clients needed answers on a couple of things that sometimes I might have otherwise glossed over because they were so normal to me, or at least familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that stood out was, the young man of the clients had just such a neat way of taking the lessons and applying them in his own way and using the tools at hand. And it really taught me that it didn't matter. As somebody who's got a background both in the psychic aspect of it, but also in the magical aspect, where there's rules and there's rituals and there's tools for how you may set up your protections and things.
Right.
That case taught me all of those things, all those rules, all those tools, all those items are nothing more than symbols. That's all they are. They are things that help you focus your intent. And, it doesn't matter if it is Solomon's brazen vessel or a peanut butter jar.
Yeah.
If you need to make something go away and you believe hard enough, and you can focus your abilities, you can do it. And I wanted to really convey that power, that every client has the ability, if they are willing to have faith in themselves and find a symbol set that's going to work for them.
Oh, that's great. And that's I remember that you had those like inserts throughout the book where you were really trying to make sure you pounded it in that, it's about symbolism here and finding what works best for you, and just such a fascinating book, great read through from the beginning to the very end. So yeah, I definitely wanted to chat a little bit about that. I thought that was worthy. Now, with the Dictionary of Demons, you more focus on almost giving a resource point for people to understand where these deities and these symbols of different cultures and societies come from and how they've almost become reclassified as a demon per se, correct?
Yeah. When I first started writing paranormal and psychic nonfiction, there was a lot of pressure to not be too academic, too scholarly with it. But my original background was very scholarly, very academic. The Dictionary of Demons was a way of taking the degree in comparative religious studies and all of the classes that I'd taken on biblical history and all the rest of it, and put it in a format that did not compromise the scholarly aspect, but was still something that anybody could pick up and read and learn from. Because one of the other problems with especially a lot of the really deep, old, research, biblical archaeology, all of that, the papers that you can find it in are so densely written and specialized for an academic audience that your average person is going to pick up and read that. And hell, most academics are just like, oh God, slog through this thing, 5 penny words. It's like you almost are in academia. There's almost an expectation to make it harder to read just to seem like you're more intelligent. And I wanted to take what was useful and jettison what wasn't useful.
Yeah.
And also make it fun. And yeah, that book came about partly because of a conversation with Father Bob on Paranormal State. And it was because I've sat in on exorcisms with him and spiritual deliverances. We've worked together on trying to identify and assess entities. And names are so important to that, but also the idea of what a demon is or isn't is such a religiously charged, symbolically charged thing. Like, you say the word demon and people just freak out.
Yeah.
And I felt that it was very important to not present it as an opinion, but to present it as, here is all of the research, here's all the ink that has been spilled over the past 6,000 years on these things, and you get to decide for yourself, like, what you make of it.
Just purely factual, no.
Yeah, I did not want to get into, like, theological theorizing. I didn't want to get into, what my belief was or wasn't. I just wanted to find, where do these names appear, and then where do the resources lead? What do those resources say? And within every entry, make sure that I put those resources right where the reader can see them, so that they can go check on the stuff themselves and draw their own conclusions.
That's good. I like
Yeah.
that.
So now another thing you do, you're involved in dream. I don't know if I want to say dream interpretation, but just dream. Would it be best to call it dream counseling?
Well, dream work, I guess.
Dream work. Okay.
That's another thing that actually goes back quite some time, and is another bit of. So in fourth grade, there was this gal who taught me, and she was another fourth grader, something that she called dream walking.
Okay.
And it's basically where lucid dreaming and out of body experience collide. It's a way of reaching out to other people. I guess you would say telepathically, like it's using essentially the same abilities, but using the medium of dreams as a backdrop, a place where those boundaries between people kind of get a lot more wibbly than they are when you're awake. And me being me, as I got older, I started to do a lot of research on, what is this actually? Because it worked. We would have shared dreams. We could go off and travel together and write stuff down and compare it the next day and see that it was nearly point for point. So it was this extraordinary way of journeying. Those experiences led me to study a lot on shamanism, Robert Monroe's stuff on out of body and astral travel, and where I found, also a lot of Carl Jung's stuff on dreams and the dreaming mind, and the Psychic Dreamwalking book is kind of the place where all of those paths cross. What I learned is, in the ancient world, if you remember the story of Jason and the Golden Fleece, that Golden Fleece was really important because they had a technique called dream incubation. It was the way in which the ancient world communicated with the gods, with spirits, with the ancestors. Almost all of those visions prophets had, even in the Bible, were had in dreams. And it was widely accepted in many ancient cultures that the dreaming space, while there were some dreams that were just dreams, it was possible for the dreaming mind to move beyond the ordinary realm and make contact with it. The boundaries broke down and you could find doorways to heaven, to hell, to the realm of the ancestors. It was very common among the Greeks to sleep at the tomb of great heroes in order to ask those heroes questions and gain insight. And in my study of the Watcher Angels, the prophet Enoch, one of the patriarchs of the Bible, his dream vision, and actually there are several things recorded as dream visions, where basically the role of the prophet in prophesizing, in communicating with heaven, the first step is to sleep, to dream, and then in that dream you journey and you communicate. And so this realm of dreams, and where our collective unconscious, where our mythic imagination, where the story part of dreams and the imaginary part of dreams cross, coincide, and sometimes blur with this other aspect that does convey legitimate information, conveys communication and interaction at a distance, that fascinated me and has fascinated me, continues to fascinate me.
Yeah, it's very fascinating to me as well. Now, And the reason why I brought it up too was because there's a lot of times where we're going through a case, and during the time of acquiring just information and data from our clients, one of the fairly large claims is that while they're sleeping or during a sleep state of sorts, they have some kind of experience and they believe it to be paranormal related. Is there a way to differentiate between a dream and an actual paranormal event, or can they be one and the same?
It can be, it depends on the type of event. Say, for example, sleep paralysis, the classic hag attack where somebody sort of wakes up and gets the sense that there's a presence in the room. It's usually a threatening presence. They feel pressed down or weighed down upon the bed. They may not be able to move. There is a very real physiological reason for that, and sometimes it is nothing more than this physiological quirk where when you go to sleep, there's a part of your brain whose responsibility is to make it so that you do not physically get up and act out your dreams.
Right.
And we learned the hard way with certain types of sleep aids that there's ways to sort of shut that off so that somebody can, sleep, eat, sleep, drive, and even sleep sex.
Yep.
So when that doesn't quite work right in waking up, sleep paralysis can occur, and it is not paranormal. But it has all of the same hallmarks. You feel like there's something there. You feel like something's holding you into the bed. You can have hypnagogic hallucinations. They are frequently of a being or a person, and it's partly because you're sort of almost got your eyes open and you don't quite, and your brain's just not interpreting any of the sensations properly. The problem, and why this is relevant to your question, with sleep paralysis versus a paranormal experience is astral attack, psychic attack, when you're asleep, something preying on you will have almost the exact same symptoms. And about the only way I've been able to reliably determine is it sleep paralysis or is it something paranormal is, first of all, are multiple people having the same experience? Are they having it independent of one another? If somebody who is asleep and subsequently reports having this experience, is there someone else who is awake, even if it's just an animal, who is also reacting to a presence?
Ah, I see.
Something that verifies it beyond just what's going on with that one person. If it's only one person and there's no other outside observation or reaction, there's no 100% way to know if it's only sleep paralysis or if there is a paranormal element. I've gone so far as to encourage people to basically do impromptu sleep studies. Have somebody who is awake while the person who's regularly being attacked is asleep. Somebody who is not like hovering over them, but is watching and trying to get some sense. Or I've had people set cameras up in rooms to see if they can catch any kind of phenomenon. In addition to cameras, other things that will measure changes, barometric pressure, temperature, anything that you can do to see if there's some other element that's going on. It's even more difficult to separate just dreams from paranormal experiences if, say, for example, it's a spirit that seems to be appearing to people in dreams and communicating with them. And in that case, at least for myself, what I use to attempt to verify it is, does the person who's having the experience have information that they could not otherwise have gotten? And it's about the same bellwether that I'll use for any psychic who's doing a reading on a location.
Right.
Because you can pick up a lot by unintentionally cold reading. It's one of the reasons with Paranormal State I liked the blindfold. Was you walk into a house, there's a lot of information on the walls, on the bookshelves, and even if you're not trying to make conclusions about that, your brain naturally, it's a great big sponge for information. You take all of that, it goes into the super processor in the back of your head and spits out a lot of ideas about what could be going on in there.
Right.
But if somebody has information that they could not have otherwise had, that in some cases maybe nobody had, and someone independent of that person does research and can verify the impressions, then there's something paranormal going on, in my opinion.
Yeah. That's I like that. That makes a lot of sense. It's also one of those tools that you could use to, well, at least I've heard people use for demonic possessions, where they're talking about receiving information that they, wouldn't know or couldn't know in that case as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Fascinating. Well, it looks like we're kind of at the end of our show here, but before we do, we wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of do some plugging, if you've got any upcoming engagements, any kind of things for people to be looking out for, how they can maybe get in touch with you as well.
Well, for both my nonfiction and my fiction books and everything else that I do, the best place to go online is my website, michellebelanger.com. And for where I'm going to be, I've got a lighter travel schedule coming up because I've been focusing so much on writing, but I'll be at Dragon Con in Atlanta at the beginning of September. I'm going to be there because that is the launch of the second book in the fiction series, Harsh Gods.
Nice.
I have a newsletter which you can sign up to on my website because I'm also, rather than traveling all over the place, I've been doing a number of online classes and things and experimenting with that. Not this weekend, but next weekend, my group we've got our annual House Kepru Gather, which is a 3-day weekend of energy work, psychic development, guest presenters. I'll be presenting on some fun topics too. And if you miss it this year, we have it in Cleveland every year, so it will be probably in June next year.
Okay.
Fun.
But I mean, the thing that I'm obviously most excited about is the fiction series, because even if fiction isn't ordinarily your thing, it's given me a place where I can organically describe how I perceived and continue to perceive the psychic side of reality, like the echoes and spirits and the way reality just seems to kind of converge over itself, like double exposure in film.
Sure. No, yeah, that's a great opportunity for you as well to be able to kind of keep that, that creative outlet going. So excellent. Well, we can't thank you enough. I mean, I know you're very, very busy. So, we're very grateful that you were able to take the time to sit down with us and just kind of have a good conversation about these various different topics. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, this was delightful. Thank you both.
You bet. Well, we will let you go for the evening, and again, we'll be in touch, and, just thank you very much.
Thank you, and have a great night.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That was an amazing conversation.
See, I knew it. I knew she was going to be amazing.
I love talking with people who just know their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And she was an absolute gem. She was very, very articulate about what she knows. And
I
what
love
she
smart
does.
people.
Yeah.
And I love people who are well-versed in literature. And when she started talking about, the Greeks, and I was just like, yes.
Yes.
I kind of got a boner. I got a girl boner.
Girl boner.
I did.
Nice. Well, for that matter, I got a... Well, no, I didn't. So, I loved particularly talking a little bit more and learning a little bit more about the case that she chose for the Ghost Hunter Survival Guide.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty neat to learn a little bit of the inside of that. It was actually in a trailer and not in a farmhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a learning experience. She enlightened us. I knew she would, and I was just really happy with overall interview itself.
Yes.
So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, with regard to how that went down?
I think it went well. I was honestly a little nervous.
Were you really?
I was, because she knows her shit,
Yeah.
and she is very smart,
She is very smart.
and she dabbles in so much stuff, like different things. I didn't know where necessarily we were going to go. I was a little intimidated.
You were probably worried that we couldn't hang, right, with her?
No, I can hang.
Okay.
No, just, if you ever, read about somebody and follow them, and then you're actually like, okay, I'm going to interview this person.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it seems a little daunting or intimidating, and
Yeah.
she was one of those people for me. I don't know why. I mean, she was lovely to talk with, and I thoroughly enjoyed it all. But just going into it, I was a little nervous.
I just knew she was going to be a good interview, just because I've seen enough of her presence on TV, and I've listened to her on other shows. She's just a good person overall, and I just knew it would go down really well.
Yeah,
so
it was
I was very
wonderful.
happy with it.
Yeah, I was happy with it too.
Yeah.
I was happy to talk to her. I was happy with how it went. I'm very thankful, Michelle, for you taking time out of your very busy schedule.
Yeah, she'd been busy editing lately.
Yeah, and I think, still getting through all that stuff and everything that you've got going on. So thank you so very much. And, trying to schedule this between all of us doing our own thing, it was, I just thank you. Thank you very much for taking time and doing this with us, because I loved it. I love talking to her. I'm hoping that maybe we can do it again when my nerves are kind of not frazzled.
So speaking of thankfulness,
Yes.
we have another shout out we should probably give out.
Yes, to our good friend Mike Smith.
Mr. Mike Smith over at the InfoSub.
Yes, so thank you, Mike. Everybody go check him out. You can go to infosub.listentomyradio.com. You can listen to us. You can listen to all sorts of wonderfulness. So please check him out.
Yes, definitely. Check him out. Well, I think that is a great spot for us to stop at on our show and
Bid you
call it a
adieu.
night.
Yes.
Thank you, folks, for listening to ASAP Radio, and stay tuned for more outstanding upcoming guests.
Yes. Good night.
Good night.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
There are people who have reported experiencing the same things that we have been experiencing.
I hear the brush popping and stuff. Oh, there he goes. Jesus.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.